Okay, this video, we're going to start off this video as an introduction to some further things, and we're going to talk about this wage calculator. So we're going to build a wage calculator, and I just bring this up so you can kind of get a look at it. We're going to create these three functions, or methods as they would be called in C#. And before we actually create the methods, let's go ahead and do the flow charting for each one. And this will give us a chance to practice some of our flow charting skills and get an idea of how you might use them. So we have the three different methods, one to actually just exit, one to, which is the first one I'll do. So I'll go ahead and pull up the flow charting symbols, and I'll save this as, exit button or something along those lines. So we'll do the exit click. So what does this method have to do? Well, it only really has to do one thing, right? But we'll just practice a little bit, a very simple flow chart here, right? We're going to start, we'll have a start. And of course, let me try different theme. We'll have a start. And then we'll also have an end. So effectively, in this case, this is going to be like a start and stop for the method. Now, it's going to seem a little odd, but really the only process we're going to do is actually close the Windows form, is to exit the application. So we'll just do this process and just indicate that we're going to close the form, exit the Windows form. So, and really, that's pretty much it. Now, for proper flow charting, I'll add the flow lines and get the arrows going in the correct directions here. Now, and a lot of times, this simple of a method, you wouldn't have to do a flow chart for, but it's nice when we're starting to just get a little practice. And what we're trying to do is think sequentially, right? We have a beginning, we have an end, we have something that goes on. The steps in between are sequential, they are ordered. And this simple flow chart is sufficient to describe that one method. So let's go ahead now and do the second method. Let's do the clear method. So in the case of the clear method, what it's going to do is, if we had text in those text boxes, and we'll talk more about the text boxes when we actually build this application, we just want to get it out of there, clear it out. So again, this should be a pretty simple flow chart describing that process. Again, I'll go ahead and save it. If you start to have a lot of flow charts for a project, you probably want to come up with some sort of naming convention, how you're going to keep track of what a particular method does. For now, you don't have to worry about it too much. I'm going to try a different color here. So again, we're going to have a start. So let's go ahead and have a start for this. And the boxes we're really going to be interested in are the input-output, right? Because for the most part, if you think about what those text boxes are doing, is they're sitting there waiting for input from the user. So we'll consider the text box to be an input. You can also consider the text box to be an output, technically, because I can also update it, and we'll actually see it used that way in one of the other methods. So let's go ahead and set the set the text to nothing. And we'll see how to do that programmatically when we actually build the program, right? So we'll have hours, we'll have the pay rate. So we'll need another input-output box for the pay rate. And I could have a stop. So there's my method. But if I start to think about it, am I missing something? And this is one of the reasons we do flowcharting, is to kind of check our logic. So if we let's go ahead and get these arrows corrected. I think I got to use the selection arrow, I think. Yeah. There we go. So let me change those to arrows. Okay, to indicate the direction of the flow lines. Technically, normal flow lines that are going top down, I can assume the arrow, but personally I like to have them in there. Now, am I missing something? And let's go back and look. How many text boxes do I have? Well, I have 3. I also have the gross pay. So if I eliminate the hourly rate and the pay and the hours, I probably should also clear the gross pay. So let's go ahead and change my zoom. This will help me be able to see all the boxes I want to put on here a little readily. So let's go ahead and I'll add another one. Let me move down the stop a little bit. There we go. Okay, and again, the point of this is to start thinking about what has to come first. Do I have all the information I need? How do I need to process that information, right? So this is a way to kind of walk through your logic before you actually start coding. It also can be used to describe coding that's already been written to help some other developers understand what's going on and what the process is you're using. All right, so there we go. There's a simple flowchart for clearing the text of the different text boxes. So the last one we have is the actual calculate gross pay, which is going to be the most complex of the 3. So let's go ahead and create a new file. Let's take a moment to load. There we go. Let me close that down. All right, I'm gonna. There we go. And I'll go ahead and save. Again, it's always nice to choose meaningful names, even for your files. That way you can recognize them. So if you looked at the 3 file names, I probably should choose similar file names. I think I had calculate button, clear button, and I had exit click. I probably should choose something that's consistent so that all 3 are the same. So I'll have a start and a stop. And in terms of that, it's nice to think about an algorithm or a method having beginning and an ending point. We know that it has it terminates. So now what I'm going to need to do, of course, is calculate the gross pay. That means I'm going to probably need a variable. And as we know, we always like to, particularly in our flowcharts, we want to create the variable and initialize it to some value. And of course, for gross pay, we can just start it at 0, right? So let's go ahead and make sure we have that ready to go so that when we go ahead and calculate the gross pay, we have some place to store it, right? So now we have the question of where are we going to get the information to do our calculation, to actually store the value of gross pay, you know, to figure out what it is. So technically, this is sort of an input-output. You know, we're gonna grab the text from the text boxes. But the question becomes is what are we really doing with them? And we're going to need two values, right? We're going to need both the number of hours and the pay rate. But if I have information I'm pulling in, I'm going to probably need some place to store it. You know, so I could try to do that all in one fell swoop, but we've kind of said that our standard for flowcharting is going to be that we're going to actually do pre-processing first. We're going to put the values, create the variables before we use them, right? So, but I do know that gross pay is going to equal the hours times the pay rate. All right. But now I have that calculation down. We can see where am I getting hours and pay rate? I don't have them, right? So that's really not going to work. So before I can actually use them in that calculation, I would have had to have gotten them, right? And I do know that once I have it, I can go ahead and set the text box, set the gross pay text box to that value. And one thing I want to point out here is I am not necessarily going in order. I'm kind of jumping down to the bottom, and that's okay because part of what you're doing is trying to come up with all the steps. So if I get down to the bottom here and I'm like, oh, well, I have gross pay and I'm setting the value of gross pay, the text box, that's great, but where did I get the hours and the pay rate? Now I can go back up and reconsider that. So what I'll do is go ahead and create two variables for the hours and the pay rate. And one of the things we'll see is the hours, while it's a number, it's actually text, right? It's a text box. And when we do the coding, I'll show that too. So there we go. And we have the pay rate, and we will also initialize it to 0. So effectively, we are creating these three variables at the beginning and initializing them in all cases to 0. There may be some cases where you don't necessarily initialize to 0. I think I missed that arrow there. Let me go back. All right. So, but now I've initialized hours and pay rate, but now I need to get them. So let's go ahead and make ourselves some more room because we're going to have to use an input-output process to actually get from the text box and store it into pay rate and hours. Let's go ahead and grab an input-output box. So I'm going to say basically hours equals the value in the, we're basically going to store it there. Technically, and we will do this conversion in the actual program, technically the value there is a string value. And one of the things we've talked about a lot is that you cannot, the way information is stored matters. So if I store something as a string, I can't just say, oh, you're an integer now, or a decimal, or a double. I can't do that. So I have to do some sort of conversion to get it into a new form. Computers store things in a specific way, and I can't just alter the way it's stored willy-nilly. If it was in one form, say as an ASCII string, if I want to convert it over and say, well, you're the string 1000, I will have to do something to convert it over to the number 1000. And we see that all the time. So that's an important thing to remember and might end up on your quiz. And I'll go ahead. I don't like the curved lines in my flowcharts. I much prefer the straight lines. So I'll change that. I'll move this up. So we've done the basic flowcharting for the three methods we're going to do. And again, the reason for doing flowcharting is to figure out the things you're going to need to do to help you identify information that you might not have thought about yet. Where am I going to get hours? Where am I, do I have a place to put gross pay once I calculate it? Do I have a stored, a place to display it? So it's a way to formalize your thinking before you go ahead and code. And again, you're not going to necessarily write a flowchart for every single method you make. But particularly at the beginning, it can be good to kind of get you thinking linearly.